welcome to Conversations with Dr. Stephen Greer. I'm Dr. Greer, and I'm the founder of SiriusDisclosure.com. It's SIRIUS, like SiriusXM, but SiriusDisclosure.com, and the Disclosure Project and CSETI. We are very grateful that the folks at the World Fuchsia Network lets us have this time every 2 weeks to bring you up to date on what's happening with our projects and on the whole front of disclosure and contact with ETs around the world, and also what we're doing with this historic and groundbreaking film, Sirius, which is now available for viewing. We actually missed one of the shows because I've been on a 3.5-week trip where we were pretty much going 18 to 20 hours a day with the big premiere out in Los Angeles and the Washington, D.C. premiere and the citizen hearings as at the National Press Club, and then of course we had the big Virginia premiere here in Charlottesville, Virginia, and then a 3-day expedition out under the stars, which just completed on the wee hours of Monday morning. So we've really been busy, but I missed being on this show, and I'm really excited about this particular one because we have one of the most renowned, and I think one of the most solid researchers on the UFO subject in the world, who has been working in this area for over 30 years, since the days of J. Allen Hynek, who, of course, was with the Project Air Force Blue Book, and later went on his own to establish the Center for UFO Studies. And she's also been someone who has been so key to helping us identify important military and pilot witnesses and evidence that's in Europe, and has done studies of the UFO subject all over the world. And I'm speaking of Paola Harris. So, Paola, thank you so much for being on the show with me today.
It's my pleasure, Steve. It's always my pleasure. Thanks for asking me.
You're welcome. Well, we were just just saw each other in Washington, D.C., which was another historic event. We've just had the 12-year anniversary of the worldwide launch of the Disclosure Project, which was on May 9th, 2001. And of course, being back at the National Press Club was very interesting, and just like to get your take on how that went.
Well, it was riveting. I did not move out of my chair, not even to go to the restroom, Steve, because I think what happened there was that the 6 people that were chosen, the 3 men and 3 women, and they were equally balanced, had no idea what they were up against when the solid evidence came before them from all over the world, pilots, people from South America, your briefing and so forth. I have a feeling they thought they were going to deal with sightings. And here they come with this solid evidence. I saw jaws drop. I saw their reactions were so they were so shocked. But what was amazing, and I will say this, we could talk about it a little bit, is a couple of them felt they really needed to step up to the plate because this was solid evidence, this was planetary changing, and I was happy to see that it was that serious. It wasn't a conference, it was a hearing.
Well, and they that Paula is talking about are the former members of Congress who were there. We had former Senator Gravel of Alaska who was there. We had Congressman Cook. We had Congresswoman Kirkpatrick and Congresswoman Woolsey, and also Congressman Barrett. And it was just an amazing group of folks who really did not know a thing about the UFO and disclosure matter that were there and heard this information from all over the world. Of course, I was testifying on both the first and the last day of the event, and on the last day went into the data on the technological information about how these UFOs work and what's being withheld from the public and what the implications of those sciences are. And I think that my take on it was that not only did they understand the implications of this, but became quite convinced that this was a matter of enormous importance, and several of them made comments to the effect that they were going to get involved in trying to see that this information was brought forward and perhaps even help educate their colleagues who are currently still in the Congress.
Yeah, Steve, what you said when you testified, you said you were an emergency doctor, and this was an emergency. And it was really, really, it came across, it was very poignant. It came across because it wasn't something, where they were attending because of entertainment. It was something because that it had such incredible implications for humanity. It changed their worldview. I saw it right in front of me. And the people that were asked to testify were solid people. A lot of them were military witnesses, some very emotional. One particular man, Colonel French, that had been asked to shoot down UFOs, he said he didn't even tell his wife. I mean, these people have been carrying the burden of truth for such a long time. And watching it, and it was incredible to watch the looks on both the Congress people and the witnesses, watching the interaction. For once, I had some hope that something would be done.
Well, and what's fascinating to me is the degree to which, for most people, they think this is sort of a sideshow issue until they realize what we collected with the Disclosure Project. And by the way, if you go to SiriusDisclosure.com, it's SIRIUS, like SiriusXM, SiriusDisclosure.com, you'll see that under UFO evidence, we're loading up a huge number of the entire testimonies of many of these top-secret military and pilot and other witnesses. And I remember when we first started gathering them before the National Press Club event 12 years ago, that many of these men wept on my shoulder privately and said that they had carried the secret of this for their entire lives, and that often their wives, no one in the whole world knew, and they didn't even know who to tell anyway, and that it was pulling a lot of them together and all coming forward at once that launched eventually, of course, the worldwide disclosure movement, and is continuing to result in these sorts of people coming forward. And I consider these men and women very heroic and courageous to have done so. And I put out a call for more of them to do so around the world who have this information, because not only is it the secrecy being handled illegally, and this is what, of course, one of the moderators was the renowned constitutional attorney Danny Sheehan, who was our advisor for the Disclosure Project. And he and I had reached the conclusion back in the late 1990s and early 2000s that the management of the secrecy was, in fact, a criminal enterprise, because one of the perspectives I tried to bring to these hearings was the fact that I was the only person in the room who had personally briefed people like the CIA director and the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency and many sitting members of Congress on the intelligence committees and oversight committees of the Congress, as well as senior officials at NASA and the National Science Foundation, et cetera, and so on. And what I had found in each and every one of these meetings I had had is that the unacknowledged special access projects, which is the proper term for these so-called black and illegal enterprises that are keeping all of this information and technology secret, were lying to people who are in very high positions. I mean, I remember when I briefed the CIA director for President Clinton that he was virtually in tears and was saying at the end of the meeting, when I asked him to help with bringing this information out, he said, well, how do the president and I bring out something that we have no access to? And it was one of the most chilling, stunning moments of my young adult life. I mean, imagine being, a guy in his mid-30s who's working full-time in emergency medicine, briefing a sitting CIA director and having someone of that level in our government say that to you. But that was only the first of dozens of senior people like that. And, of course, the Honorable Paul Hellyer, who had been Minister of Defense for Canada, testified also at these hearings at the National Press Club. And he had told me privately that the entire time that he was the Minister of Defense of Canada, which, of course, is a G7, group of 7 major country, he had never been told anything about this subject. And it wasn't until years later when he read Colonel Corso's book, The Day After Roswell, and he ended up talking to an Air Force general who confirmed to him that that information was substantially correct and more, that he began to really look into this. And then, of course, he and I met quite a few times and we held a press conference, actually, up in Toronto. But here you had a Minister of Defense telling me that. And I always point out that someone who is in our film Sirius, which you can now look at. It's online on video on demand at SiriusDisclosure.com for anyone who wants to see it. Or you could also pre-order the DVD. We had a long meeting with the Minister of Defense of Great Britain, Lord Hill Norton. And just so people get a sense of who that man was, I mean, this was a man who was a 5-star admiral, what they used to call a Sea Lord. And in the House of Lords, he was head of the Ministry of Defense. He was head of the Military Committee for NATO. He was, as head of the Ministry of Defense, they're also sort of the head of our CIA, which would be MI5 and MI6 in Great Britain. And I'll never forget sitting in his, what he called his cottage, which was one of these grand old manor houses in Hampshire. And I'm sitting in his living room, and he's saying, would you please give me the briefing you're putting together for the President and for the UN Secretary General and people like that? And I said, certainly I will. And he says, you know, the entire time that I was in these very high positions, none of this was known to me. It wasn't until years later that he found out about the subject and started making inquiries. And he was really scared and also angry that as a Minister of Defense of Great Britain and being the head of the Military Committee for NATO all those years, that he had been completely zoomed, denied access, completely, left out of the loop. And he was just shaken. And he says, who else has this happened to? And I said, well, the current president, the CIA director, the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency. He looked at me. He says, in America? I said, yes. I said, the folks who are running these programs have completely done what Eisenhower warned us about when he said, beware the military-industrial complex, because it will become a threat to our way of life and our democracy. I said, that has fully come to pass. And I said, this really is a threat to our way of life, because it's not just withholding the information, which is interesting. They're withholding all these sciences and technologies which would get us off of oil. And, of course, that's the punchline that at the last day of the hearing, that was, Paula, my main focus was the reason for the secrecy isn't because people think they can't handle that there's intelligent life in the universe. It's because by October of 1954, these clandestine research projects that were going on since the 40s had figured out gravity control and how to build these anti-gravity devices, which people call UFOs, but they're not unidentified to the people who fly them, and that these technologies, if we could disclose them, would give us a source of energy and eventually transportation that would make all the oil and gas and coal and nuclear power and public utilities and pollution a thing of faint memory of the past. And that should have happened half a century ago, and it hasn't. And so it isn't just a matter of some curiosity about ETs out there. Really is why I tell people our planet is in a global geophysical and geopolitical emergency, and the remedy is sitting in a black box that we have to all come together and figure out how to bring out. And I think that was the message that I know when talking to Senator Gravel and some of the other Congress people, that they were really taken with that, because they saw that was actionable intelligence. That was information that would make a difference to the average person, whereas whether or not there's life out there in the universe may or may not be of interest to, the good old boy down the road who, with his pickup truck. But if he's driving an F-150 pickup truck, he's got to spend almost $100 to fill it up with gasoline. But if he had an electric motor that was pulling energy out of the 0-point energy field, he would have zero cost for running his truck. So the average person begins to realize, oh, it's about macroeconomic power. And that is also something that the Honorable Paul Hellyer, the former Minister of Defense of Canada, brings to the table, is a very clear understanding of how the banking system and the macroeconomic, what I call masters of the universe, the MOTUs, have really seized this issue and kept it secret, not for valid national security reasons, but they want to maintain their grip on the centralized economic system that has resulted in the current mess we're in, and that this is something that it's not that difficult to understand when you start realizing that it involves hundreds of trillions of dollars in commodities and mineral assets.
Well, I think the film Sirius makes that clear. And you had the showing in Washington. I attended it. That was the second time that I've seen it, and it was quite powerful. The more you watch that film, the more you see new aspects of that film. And I think it's very clear that that's the message. And it's very clear that that's the bottom line, and that you're willing to put not only funds but your life on the line for this, because this is what remains after we're all gone. The fact that there's some part of the earth or some part of the paradigm that's changed, that's made a difference. And the thing, Stephen, that I noticed was that they were not defensive when a lot of accusations were hurled against the United States or the United States Congress. They were not defensive at all. In fact, they said it's a national security state. Nothing gets done. We can't go that way. We can't go that route. And what they prefer to do, from what I understand, and this is, Senator Gravel too, is to go United Nations route, to maybe with the help of a small country bring this resolution to the United Nations. And the small country I think that volunteered was Uruguay. And Uruguay, I think, is on board for that, because whatever happens to us on the energy level is planetary. It's not just, this is not a United States issue.
No, it's global. And yet, one of the problems, and this is something I've never really talked about publicly, and I'm a little reluctant to, but since you brought it up, the original, 12 years ago, the event that happened at the National Press Club was supposed to have happened in the General Assembly of the UN, and I had a commitment from Kofi Annan, the head of the UN Secretary General, who came in after Boutros Boutros-Ghali, who I had briefed on this. And unfortunately, they were threatened. And I got a call from the Secretary General's right-hand person and said, look, here is his phone number at his private residence at Sutton Place. They do want to be supportive, but it's been made very clear by some very powerful interests that if the UN were to do what you're suggesting and get behind disclosing this information, that the financing and other security arrangements and support for the United Nations would be in existential jeopardy. And I was so stunned because I had gotten a commitment, and very few people know that the Disclosure Project launch in 2001 was supposed to be at the United Nations.
Wow.
And so the reason I keep returning to this theme of we the people need to do disclosure, we the people need to make contact, we the people need to pull our resources and build an energy laboratory where we bring out these amazing sciences, is that, and perhaps I'm just getting cynical and old, I don't know, but I'm a little dubious of any large existing institution, whether it be the UN or any government, being able to accomplish this, because the powers that want to squash it are so huge and so threatening that they don't mind going to a UN Secretary General and making a directed threat. I mean, look, after I briefed Bill Clinton's CIA director, one of Bill Clinton's good friends came to my home. And you may have heard this story, Paula. And we're sitting around the dinner table with my 4 little daughters. And we're just talking. This guy was sort of a big, kind of heavy-set Democratic operative. He and his brother used to stay at the White House a lot with the president. And he said, the president and the White House is very supportive of what you're recommending in your position, your white paper. It's in my first book, Extraterrestrial Contact, The Evidence and Implications, which you can get at SiriusDisclosure.com if you want to read this briefing. And I had put together a set of executive orders and actions, and this man who is very close to the president said, but I don't believe that they will do it because it's too dangerous for the president. And he says they're quite convinced that if he does this, he'll end up like Jack Kennedy. And I start laughing because this guy was kind of a big jokester. And I start laughing, ha, 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 ha. He stops me. He says, no, I'm not kidding. I said, well, don't talk about this in front of the children. So, we go, I said, let's go to the library after dinner and talk about this. And so this man told me that the elements, this covert group known as Majestic, or MJ-12 back in the Truman era, was so ruthless that the people around the president, and especially Hillary, didn't feel that the president could be protected from them. And I said, well, Kevin, what do you want me to do? And he says, well, they think you can do it. And I said, oh, well, what you're really saying is that I'm expendable. It doesn't matter if I get killed. He says, yes, that's right, you're expendable. And we had a kind of a good laugh about it. So that is a 100% true story. And so one of the things that I keep returning to, and I think people from, I hate to say the outside, but people who haven't sat with these sorts of folks in our society, very powerful people in responsible positions, who have seen how the system works against them, really are afraid. And this is one of the things I was trying to explain to Bassett, because he's never had meetings with people like that. And I said, look, this isn't as simple as you think. And now it isn't to say that a country couldn't bring in a resolution and there could be a certain amount of activity at the UN, but getting anything definitive done is going to be a heavy, heavy lift. And I think that heavy lift needs to come from everyone listening to this interview. They need to understand that the public officials and the people will only act when the people lead first and demand that there be action. And so that's why this is a movement activist thing rather than a top-down program, and always has been. And we knew that after, well, I realized that in 1993 and 94, after I had made the rounds in these really senior circles. It was quite clear to me. And then, of course, I went to members of Congress between 94 and 99 with a lot of this information, current, not former, like there were last week, but the actual people who were chairman of committees and people on the Senate Intelligence Committee and people like that. And they would just go, look, this is past my pay grade. This is where we can't take this on. And I'll never forget the Honorable Paul Hellyer bringing this up to a senator up in Canada who was on their Military and National Security Committee, or whatever they call it, chairman, who had been actually worked under him during their career. And he said, look, you're asking me to reel in a 5,000-pound whale, and I've got a 5-pound line here. I'm just a member of the Canadian Senate. And so, I know to the average person this sounds like through the looking glass, but in reality that's what happens. And this is why people need to understand that no matter what happens in what area of governmental, whether it's UN or another country, the real action is us. It's the people.
I agree with you, Steve, 100%. But if they do open this up, they don't have to go to the energy. They could go to the national security issue, or the pilot issue, or the danger to pilots, or something that's just like in grade 1 of this. Because I think the bottom line is the energy issue. If they started a dialogue, because I was approached by Mario Borghesio in November, and he was a parliamentarian with the EU. Right. What he wanted to do is just open up the cases. and
right.
say this is real, and that's grade one. That's grade one. That's not going to the graduate school of this. But I have a question for you. In 2009, Saudi Arabia invited Stanton Friedman, Nick Pope, Jacques Vallée, Mishukaku to their meeting, their economic meeting in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia there. And why were they interested in UFOs? Why are the Arabs interested in UFOs? I was, my ears went up. I thought, whoa, this is not about UFOs. This is about economics, and that's where we are. And somebody out there is interested in this. And Stanton Friedman's first words were, UFOs are real, to a group of people that paid $5,000 to go to that.
Well, I think it's fine to say UFOs will and keep it on a teleologic, or I hate to say the word superficial level, but what the whole point that we've made in the film Sirius, which if those of you listening haven't seen it, you should get online and see it right now. The proceeds of the film go to create a new energy lab to bring out these hidden technologies that would get us off of oil. So if you care about the environment, you should care about this film. And it was, by the way, crowdfunded by all of you, and so you should go and see it. I mean, tens of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people have seen it. It's been amazing. It was the world's largest and most successful crowdfunded, publicly funded documentary in history, and the rollout of it has been broken all records. In fact, our team is now at the Cannes Film Festival, showing it to people to break it into more and more elements of the media and society. But one of the things that I would say is that staying at the level of, well, here's the sightings, it's important, but you have to connect the dots in the same meeting to the reason for the secrecy. And here's why. I learned the hard way when I was briefing a lot of these senior officials. They go, okay, I could understand that there are these cases that are episodic and ephemeral. They kind of come and go. But could there really be anybody trying to keep this secret? To what end? And that's when you have to immediately connect the dot, which is what Paul Hellier's gotten quite good at doing, and it's been what I've been really sharing with him and others, to the technology and science part of this. Because even the folks, the day after the hearings ended, I was at a picnic with a group of CIA and NSA scientists out there near the CIA headquarters on that Saturday after the hearings at the National Press Club. And that was the big topic was, of course, this is a science and technology story, not, something that just floats across the sky, because basically, what is the energy system behind how a UFO is moving? And if they're there and if they're real, the next question is, what is the technology behind them and who's in them and why are they here and what's going on? So anyone who's intelligent immediately is going to have that as a question, and we have to be ready to provide the answers, which fortunately we have. And I think that then connects it to what I call relevancy. An ephemeral thing isn't relevant. And to most people, even that there's intelligent life out in the universe, while interesting, isn't day-to-day in their life relevant. The fact that there's a cabal of folks who I call the petro-fascists keeping the science and technology secret from us for not just, a few years, but for the better part of a century, that is news, and that is something everyone should be concerned about, because unless we move forward, we're going to end up where we're going. Everyone laughed when I said this at the National Press Club. Unless we change directions, we're likely to end up where we're headed. And we're headed for a very bad situation if we can't fix this problem. The good news is that we can fix it, and the technology and the means to do it are there. So I think that we have to do both. I think we have to provide the evidence and then connect the dots, and there's only a couple dots that have to be connected, which is what we attempt to do in this it's less than 2 hours in this film. It's sort of a portal. And what I tell people is the film Sirius is a portal for people to then study this subject further. And I think the filmmaker did a very good job at creating a really excellent film, probably the best one ever done on the subject.
Yeah, it has a lot of elements, including the being and the use of science to to examine the DNA of the being, and it has just about everything in it. It covers. People remained, also in this case with their jaws open because they were shocked to see so much in there, and they were speechless. I mean, where do you go from that? That was for a lot of people a real awareness, an awakening.
Oh, it wasn't for, it's really powerful to see on a big screen, I must say. I wanted to mention that we're going to have a theatrical release on the big screen in New York and L.A. beginning May 31st for a week, an entire week in New York City at the Quad. You can go to quadcinema.com and see what showing times they'll have. We're just now setting that up, so they don't have the show times up yet, but it will be every day for a week in New York City at the Quad there in, I think it's in Greenwich Village. And then also in Los Angeles in the Beverly Hills area, there's the Lamley, the Artist Theater, and it's LAEMMLE.com. It's a strange name and hard to spell. I'll just spell it again, LAEMM, like mother, MMLE, Lamley.com. And that'll also be May 31st to June 6th for an entire week for a theatrical showing. So if you're on the East Coast or West Coast, you can get to those. That's where you can see it on the big screen until we get a wider release. As we're sort of doing a gradual rollout of the film all over the world. But this is wonderful because we've engaged both these. They are actually Oscar-qualifying theaters. It means that when it's shown there, is then eligible for Academy Award and Oscar nomination. So I'd love to have a lot of people go to those. So we will, once we get the exact show times and information up, we'll also have those up on our site, SiriusDisclosure.com. And you can sign up for free for our newsletters and information, and we'll let you know. So that's going to be happening here fairly soon in the next few weeks there in New York and L.A.
You also said a lot of personalities were interested in this. Sometimes they can push it along even more so.
Yeah, we haven't talked. I mean, the Los Angeles premiere was just amazing, and a couple of days before the premiere, we were at a wonderful party at Paula Abdul's house, and there were all sorts of notable people in the Hollywood community and Los Angeles community there. And, people like Tim Robbins and Matt Bodine and Thomas Jane and a lot of actors and actresses and people who've won Emmys and Grammys and what have you, and musicians were at this big Los Angeles premiere. I mean, it was so crazy. You were there. I mean, we had to engage 2 theaters, and those were all sold out. We could have engaged 2 more, but we had 1,100 people there. And then, of course, beforehand, we had a dinner for 90 people who had been involved with the film and helped fund it. And then afterwards, we had an after party that went till 2 a.m. for about 600 people. So it was quite a week. Oh,
it was fantastic. It was really an event. And I will do what I can. I'm leaving for Italy for a month in June. And I will be lecturing in Europe, and I'll do what I can because I think that everyone needs to see this film because it has all the components of what needs to be done, but it's also for the people.
Exactly, and it was funded by the people, and luckily now we have a hosting company that was able to put it up, so we have it video on demand that anyone now in the world can go there and see it. And it's in a number of languages, and we're trying to expand those to 15 to 20 languages total eventually. So we're going to be improving those over the next couple of weeks, and that's really exciting because that means that people, who speak Portuguese or Italian or French or Spanish would be able to have it subtitled so that they would be able to if they don't, understand English well, would be able to do that and see it in their country, German, Finnish, all kinds of languages. So it's going to be a global release is what we're building up to. This is just sort of the initial crowdfunding release over the last 2 or 3 weeks, but it's still been, I mean, even the trailer for this film has been viewed millions of times on YouTube, and the Huffington Post had an article about the Atacama humanoid that had around 4 million people view it, and the article, and it was the top-rated story on the Huffington Post for 3 or 4 days in a row, which is kind of unprecedented, particularly for a small community-funded documentary. And I have to just thank everyone who supported it, because that's how we got to this point. It's been and you think about it, it was just a year ago that we announced that we were going to try to raise the funds. And in less than a year, we completed the film and had the premiere and have gotten it out. So it's been a hard year. It's been a lot of work, but it's been very exciting.
Yeah, it has been. And I'm going back to Crestone in June before I leave for Europe. I feel I need that energy. And I know you're doing more trainings in Shasta.
Yeah, well, actually, we're going to be there in England. If you're in Europe over that period, we're going to be in the United Kingdom. We're going to be in England doing these contact protocols in the crop circles, July 27th until August 3rd. What we're going to do is that we have this 1,800-acre estate farm that we get to use at night, where we sit out under the stars and at night and use the contact protocols using remote viewing and electronic tones and lasers to make contact, which actually one of the contact events that Paula saw is actually in the film Sirius, when the film director brought his crew out to Crestone about 11 months ago, and I think he was stunned to see this disc fly right over us that then had jet interceptors come in to try to take it out. And but we're going to be doing this in the crop circles, and then what we do during the day, instead of doing classroom work or meetings, we actually every afternoon go to sacred sites like Stonehenge and Silbury Hill and West Kennet Longbarrow and Avebury and all those very famous ancient sacred places in England. And we also go to crop circles and do meditations in the crop circles and do sort of out under the sky kind of classroom situations where, I teach people the remote viewing techniques, and often I'll even do a puja in the crop circles, which is very powerful. People love that. So that's going to be going on July 27th to August 3rd. And if you want to come on that, that's also, the information on that's also on SiriusDisclosure.com. And then we will be out west in around Labor Day or in September. We're still looking at those dates and locations where we're going to do another expedition here in the United States. So we have those coming up for people. Just stay tuned and look at our website for the details that'll be coming.
I'm glad you mentioned it, Steve, because that changed my life. Learning the protocols at Crestone, but you also had sounds that came from the crop circles. You have so much there that just puts you in the mood. It just has it be so easy to make that kind of contact. And contact is another important part of the film.
Yeah, well, it's really the thing that has been the part of this that's kept me going the most has been what the world can be like with these new technologies and sciences out, and also a citizens' diplomacy effort where now we have a couple of thousand teams all over the world that have learned these techniques for making contact and are having amazing contact experiences. In fact, we just did a 3-day thing here in Virginia in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and on the very last night it got crystal clear. And the last hour that we were out under the stars, we were doing this meditation and remote viewing process, and suddenly right above us was this huge blue-white disc and light that lit up the sky in a crystal clear sky. And everyone who saw it went, "Oh my God, it's unbelievable." And that craft is very much like the craft. I guess it was bigger than the one that came over us at Crestone that's in the film, but it was magnificent. And it's the craft that has the same shape and color of the one we see almost every time we do this, that has this ET that I call kindness. who is a very evolved, it's a woman ET ambassador who has a perfectly round head, and I call her Kindness because I don't know what name she would go by on her planet, but she has sort of the perfect countenance of kindliness. And I met her the night Sherry Adamak, my assistant who died of breast cancer back in 1998, 15 years ago, whose ashes are on the tree on my land in Creston, Colorado. But Kindness appeared that night, and I had a lucid dream with Kindness, and she has come and appeared at every single one of these contact expeditions for 15 years, and she appeared Monday night, or in the Monday morning, the wee hours, right above our heads. It was absolutely stunning.
Yeah, I think she also appeared in Rio Rico in Arizona.
Yes.
Yeah,
we have a photo and video of that also. Yeah, she did.
Which means that up there, they're following what we're doing down here.
Oh, very carefully. Yeah.
And that we have friends in high places, and that whatever.
Look past the White House, thankfully.
Yeah, past the White House, and whatever.
One of the things I wanted to get into, and I know we only have 15 more minutes, but I wanted you to bring people up to date on the research you were doing on these amazing humanoid remains that you've been looking into in Europe that you found.
Well, I finally found a crew that'll follow me there because I promised to the people in Sardinia, near Cagliari, Sardinia, that I would do something. There are people that own land there. There are farmers and people that have, manor houses and so forth that have these tombs on their land. And what they've done is they've dug them up themselves, and they find these femurs and these teeth and these bones and formal archaeology doesn't know where to place that. They don't even want to talk about it. And the people and these skeletons of these people are 15 foot tall. They're people that maybe in ancient times we used to call the Titans.
Right.
Because mythology has a lot of truth in it. And when I used to teach ancient history in Rome, in Italy, I realized that a lot of what we thought was mythology was just ET intervention, were peoples that were coming to these different countries like Greece, like ancient Mesopotamia, also in the Mediterranean. And so, this one particular man, Luigi Muscas, has written 3 books and has all kinds of photos of what he's found in his own property, and there's pictures of me with this big tooth. It is not a bovine tooth. It is not an animal tooth. It is a human tooth, and he has a jaw. He has a femur, and the thing that's amazing, even though he has archaeological remains and artifacts which could belong to the people that study ancient aliens, what he tells me is that they do come back. And when I asked him what he's talking about, he said, well, at night we sit around and look at the skies and we see coming from the sky these blue tubes, blue lights. And he says there's people that come down on this land in these blue lights. He said we could see them. We can see that they still walk among us. And
that's exactly right. We've had this happen at Shasta, and some of them we were told were from the Arcturan star system, and they were like that. They were 12 to 15 feet tall, and we actually have some where they're not fully quite materialized, but these huge, tall, humanoid-shaped beings that are right up against this massive log house at Mount Shasta, and it had to be at least 15 feet tall.
Well, that's amazing, and the more you collect this, the more someday in the near future they'll put 2 and 2 together, and they'll realize that we've been visiting, because you have the photos that you do, and you're still doing them, aren't you? You're still doing a lot of photography.
Oh, yes, and see, the thing is that one of the whole areas that we're trying to explore is transdimensional photography, where if an ET being is not fully materialized but has gone from one star system to this one and hasn't phased in to but you can begin to see them. We've learned that we can photograph them. People say, well, why don't they just completely materialize? I say, well, because it can be very dangerous. I mean, that craft that materialized and came over us in Crestone 11 months ago immediately had jet fighters on their tail, no doubt with orders to shoot to kill. So what we find is that we'll often have these contact experiences, and we are getting photographs of them. And in fact, this past weekend, we got several amazing photographs of objects right around us in the field and overhead. And I think that that's, of course, it was too much to put in this short film, Sirius, and I think the director felt some of this stuff was a little too way out there. But because this, the whole film is his take as someone who knows nothing about the subject, so it was quite a learning curve for him. But what I tell people is that the next thing I want to put out there is going to be on what you're discovering with these giant probable ET beings in Sardinia and elsewhere. But what we want to do also with this Atacama humanoid, which, by the way, from meeting with all these wonderful South American researchers who were in Washington last week, we were able to put together that there are probably 3 or 4 additional bodies that are similar, if not identical, to the Atacama humanoid. Now, there are people who don't know what I'm talking about. In the film Sirius, there is featured this mummified skeletal remains that we think is at least 100 years old. And the team at Stanford University has concluded it's a 6 to 8 year old child. And it is absolutely not a fetus, but it's only 6 inches, it's 13 centimeters. And you don't have 6 to 8 year old children live to be 6 inches big, period. And what's interesting is the genetics so far is showing that it has a lot of genetics identical to us. However, 9% of the genetic material is unmatched. And now the geneticist is saying, well, we don't know what that's from. It could be computer error. It could be this. It could be that. But in reality, we all know it was a very high-quality genetic sample. It did not have to go through a lot of PCR replication, which I won't go into what that is. The bottom line is that there should not be 9% that's unmatched. And even if a third of it is legitimate genetic material that controlled that being, that would be 3%. 3% would make that creature more different from you and me than we are from chimpanzees. And I point out to people that it's quite a mystery because now we've learned that there is an even smaller one, a younger one, that's in the possession of somebody in Santiago, Chile, and that there may be a mine in Chile where when they were mining, they cut into an underground city that was this miniature city where these small creatures lived. And so we really hope at some point, if we can get the research funds in place, to take an expedition there because it's quite a story. But, a lot of people, a lot of the folks in the media, when they saw from the geneticist report that there was a lot of human DNA in this particular body, said, oh, well, it's human. Well, no, nobody knows that yet. He doesn't know it. Nobody does. And it turns out there are 2 million base pairs of genetic material that is unmatched. That's a very big number. And unfortunately, what that means is that it's probably going to be 1 to 5 years before anyone can go through those 2 million base pairs and see what it is. Now, if you were taking it from a known human living person, you would just throw it away into the trash can. But what the top professor at Stanford University said, and by the way, if you want to read his report, it's at SiriusDisclosure.com, SIRIUS Disclosure.com. You can link right to this Atacama report, and it has Dr. Lockman's report where he says, number 1, this is no known genetic defect he's ever seen, and this is the world's expert on skeletal abnormalities and defects. He says, number 2, it's a 6 to 8 year old by bone density and the growth plates, and not just in the knee, but the entire body. We learned 2 nights ago. He said, oh, no, it's not just that one joint, it's the entire body, which he did not say in the report. Number 3, the genetics have been run for the parts of the genome that would normally control for dwarfism or advanced bone aging that could explain why it looks like a 6 to 8 year old and it's only 6 inches long. All those genes are normal. So there's something very strange going on here. And this from the top scientific team in the world on this subject at Stanford University. And so there's so much more research to do. I doubt within maybe a year to 5 years we may have an answer. The problem is we're trying to run genetic material, but we don't have an ET genetic database. We only have a human one. So the fact that a certain amount of it's matching isn't surprising because it's a humanoid. But on the other hand, you have to understand that a Neanderthal, which is a totally different species from humans, it's Homo neanderthalis, is 99.5% identical to modern humans. So it's only 0.5% difference between a modern human, and a Neanderthal. So we're dealing with something where to go into this 9%, which is a pretty big number, of unmatching DNA, and run that to ground, going through 2 million base pairs of DNA material, is an enormous research project that's going to have to involve probably dozens of scientists around the world, and that's what the team at Stanford is trying to put together.
Well, it's really impressive, and it's also impressive that that science is being used in that way, to look for ET genome, and maybe that'll be a byproduct or a spinoff of the whole entire research in this field.
Well, I think this is why I'm suggesting to you that if the folks who have these artifacts from Sardinia, if there are bones, and if the bones are at all intact and not pulverized or fossilized, then inside the bones will be bone marrow, which will be rich in DNA. Remember, the way we got the DNA from this Atacama humanoid, this little 6-inch, 6 to 8-year-old child, was that we clipped the ribs, the bones of the ribs, and found inside those ribs really rich bone marrow that was very dry but very well preserved, and that's how we got the DNA material. So if you have bones, there should be DNA material. You can't really get it out of the calcified bones material per se, but like if you have a tooth, you would have the core of the tooth that would have DNA, and if you have a bone, then you have the marrow that would have DNA. So there's a very good chance that we would be able to extract carefully DNA from those samples and see what exactly that is. And it'd be interesting to see how related those creatures are to humans. And, it could be that the Native American people who said that, look, we've somehow been descended from the stars, and these beings from the stars are our ancestors, maybe it's not just mythology. Maybe it's quite literally true.
Oh, I have no doubt it is. It's just that, just like anything else, the modern, anthropology doesn't have any kind of reference for it, so they just eliminate it. And
that's right.
And that's a problem, because these people have been threatened. I mean, when I was speaking to Luigi, he was telling me they've been told to shut up. They've been told not to talk about it, and they've been told not to bring, cameras there and so forth. But we'll all keep trying, because no matter how we come to it, no matter which road we all take, we're all going to the same place to get to the truth.
Exactly, and that's why when we shortly after we began to release the information on this Chilean body, this Atacama humanoid, we found out that in 1996, and I remember now, I was called in to go to Russia to look at a body that had been acquired that was a little bit larger. Maybe it was, maybe upwards of maybe close to a foot. It might have been more of an adult version of the one that's in Chile that we're doing the DNA on, and it was one that was living, that had been captured by some eccentric woman who tried to keep it alive, but it died in her captivity. And unfortunately, before I could get there and we could get any samples, it was seized by allegedly by the FSB, which is the entity that took the place of the KGB in Russia, and it was lost to follow-up. However, there are photographs and videotape of it that we've recently acquired, and when you look at the skull of that particular creature and you look at the skull of the one we're doing the studies on at Stanford, it's the same, and it has 4 skull bones instead of 6 like we have in the cranium. It has very similar plates in how they overlap and fuse. It's remarkably similar. Now, whether it's identical or not, we'll never know unless we can get a genetic sample or at least get a good CAT scan and MRI or good X-rays. But we may not, if in fact it did get confiscated by the intelligence services in Russia. But even the fact that there's existing photos and videos of something that looks very similar, we think that there may be more of these that are of the same species of what we have from the Atacama desert of Chile, which is why we call it the Atacama humanoid. But we may, of course, have other things to investigate if at some point you could help facilitate access to these remains that are in Sardinia, because that may be another entire species to examine and to get evidence for. So, and in fact, one of the things that's exciting about the team at Stanford is that they're very willing to continue this process with other legitimate specimens.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, we can go at it from that angle, and in the meantime, I will be looking up at the skies in Europe, as you will in England, and we'll just, keep talking about the film and just keep going at it.
Right, and remember, everyone can sign up. If you go to our website, SiriusDisclosure.com, you can become an affiliate for the film and sign up, and everyone in your group or organization that sees the film through you linking them to it, you will be able to get a portion of the proceeds of the film to support your own research and your own efforts. So it's sort of a way of virally getting the film out so it benefits everyone who's trying to do these good things in the world. So anyone interested can do that. It costs nothing to become an affiliate. And if you haven't seen the film yet, I would encourage you to see it at our website. You can see it on video on demand, and you can also order the DVD. And also you can we'll be able to see it on the big screen as a theatrical release at these Oscar award nominating qualified venues. And that's a very specific criteria, by the way. Again, it'll be at the Quad in New York City from May 31st until the 6th of June, and it will be at the same dates in Los Angeles at the Lamley there in Beverly Hills. So we'll have more information on our website about that as it gets closer to the time. But that's if you want to see it on the big screen, that's where we're doing a whole week rollout in those 2 large cities if you're in those areas. So well, we're about out of time. Paula, I just want to thank you so much for everything you've done. You've done such great, amazing work and research all over the world, and have kept the good fight. And thank you so much for your help and support.
And thank you, Steve. Thank you so much, because you're really a hero to me, and we'll just keep going.
We are going to keep going. It's awesome. So we'll see you soon. And to everyone at the World Fusion Network, thank you for hosting us here. I really appreciate your help and support. And I hope everyone will go to our website and see the film and network it to others. The proceeds of the film are going to a research fund to create a new energy lab so that we can bring out these sciences and technologies quickly and safely so we can get off of fossil fuels. And that is the purpose that we created this film, as well as educating the public. So go there and let everyone you know on your email list and your Twitter feed and social network and Facebook know about it, because that's really how, at this point, we're getting the word out about the film. Again, thank you so much, and until next time, keep looking up. God bless you. Bye-bye.